Deep beneath the earth, ancient mechanisms stir in chambers that haven't seen light for 10,000 years. Above them, towering spires pierce the sky like stone fingers reaching toward forgotten gods. This is Hyrule Castle, not merely a fortress but a living enigma whose secrets have shaped the destiny of an entire kingdom. Tonight, we descend into its hidden depths and scale its forbidden heights, uncovering 120 facts that reveal why this isn't just architecture. It's a monument to the eternal war between light and shadow. The geological foundation beneath Hyrule Castle tells a story older than recorded history. Here, where the land rises in natural prominence above the surrounding plains, ancient limestone formations created bedrock both stable and malleable. These sedimentary layers, deposited over millions of years when primordial seas covered this region, provided the perfect foundation for what would become one of the most enduring structures in Hyrule's history. The natural caves and underground chambers that honeycomb the rock weren't obstacles to overcome. They were features to embrace. Archaeological evidence suggests this elevated position was occupied long before the establishment of the Hyrulean royal line. Primitive settlements, dating back thousands of years, have left their mark in the deepest excavations beneath the castle. Stone tools, pottery fragments, and ritualistic burial sites indicate that ancient peoples understood something special about this place. They built their homes into the natural rock faces, carved their temples into the cliff sides, and established what may have been Hyrule's first permanent settlement on this sacred ground. The transition from these early settlements to a true fortification began with the arrival of the first Hylian tribes. These weren't random wanderers seeking shelter. They were a people guided by divine purpose, carrying with them knowledge of the Triforce and understanding of their destiny as protectors of the realm. When they first gazed upon this natural stronghold, they saw not just strategic advantage, but spiritual significance. The three peaks surrounding the central plateau seemed to mirror the three aspects of the Triforce itself. The decision to build here wasn't made by military strategists or architects. It was divinely ordained. Ancient texts speak of the first king receiving visions that led him to this exact spot, where the spiritual energy of the land converged in ways that amplified the power of those who ruled with righteousness. The natural springs that emerged from the rock provided fresh water even during the longest sieges, while the elevated position offered clear views across the entire kingdom. The original construction methods employed by these early builders demonstrate sophisticated understanding of both engineering and mysticism. Rather than imposing their will upon the landscape, they worked with the natural contours of the rock, following the grain of the stone and the flow of underground waterways. The massive blocks used in the earliest foundations weren't quarried from distant locations. They were carved directly from the living rock of the cliff face, creating seamless integration between natural formation and human artifice. These founding builders possessed knowledge that seems almost magical by today's standards. They understood how to work stone without modern tools, how to create joints so precise that not even a blade could slip between them, and how to channel the natural acoustics of the caves to create chambers where whispers could carry across vast distances. The techniques they employed were passed down through generations of master stonemasons, each adding their own innovations while preserving the sacred methods of their predecessors. The symbolic significance of building into the rock itself cannot be overstated. In Hylian culture, the earth represents permanence, stability, and the enduring nature of divine will. By carving their stronghold directly into the bones of the world, the early rulers weren't just creating a defensive position, they were making a statement about the eternal nature of their covenant with the goddesses. The castle wasn't built upon the land, it was born from it, as natural and inevitable as the mountains themselves. Water played a crucial role in determining the sacred nature of this location. The underground springs that still flow beneath the castle today were seen as tears of the goddesses, blessing the site with their presence. These waters, which emerge crystal clear from deep within the earth, were believed to possess healing properties and were used in royal ceremonies for centuries. The natural pools formed by these springs became sacred bathing chambers for the royal family. The early builders also recognized the astronomical significance of the site. The castle's position creates natural alignments with celestial bodies that were considered crucial for maintaining the kingdom's spiritual balance. During certain times of the year, the sun rises directly through gaps in the eastern peaks, flooding the central courtyard with golden light that was interpreted as divine approval. These alignments weren't coincidental. They were carefully observed and incorporated into the castle's design. The integration of natural cave systems into the castle's design represents one of the most ingenious aspects of its construction. Rather than viewing these underground chambers as obstacles to overcome, the builders saw them as ready-made rooms that required only minor modifications to serve their purposes. Some caves became storage chambers for grain and supplies, their natural cool temperatures perfect for preservation. Others were transformed into sacred spaces where the acoustics of the stone amplified prayers and ceremonial chants. The deepest chambers, those closest to the underground springs, were reserved for the most sacred purposes. Here, in rooms carved from solid rock and lit only by reflected water light, the royal family performed the most important rituals of their reign. These chambers, connected by narrow passages that required crawling to navigate, were designed to humble even kings and queens, reminding them that true power comes from humility before the divine. As generations passed, each ruler added their own touches to the foundation while respecting the sacred nature of the original construction. New chambers were carved following the traditional methods, new passages were opened to connect different areas, and new systems were developed to channel water and air through the growing complex. Yet, through all these expansions, the original spirit of the place remained unchanged. A fortress born from the earth itself, blessed by the goddesses, and destined to stand as long as Hyrule endured. The evolution of Hyrule Castle's architecture tells a story that spans countless generations, each era leaving its distinctive mark upon the growing structure while honoring the sacred foundations that came before. What began as a modest fortress carved into living rock gradually transformed into one of the most magnificent and complex architectural achievements in the known world. The earliest expansion beyond the original cave dwellings occurred during what historians call the First Golden Age, roughly 3 centuries after the initial settlement. During this period, the royal family commanded resources and craftsmen from across the growing kingdom, allowing them to begin the first true above-ground construction. The architects of this era faced a unique challenge: how to build upward from a foundation that was literally carved into a cliff face. The key innovation was the development of what became known as the Hylian cantilever system. Rather than simply building straight up from the cliff edge, which would have created structural instability, the builders extended massive stone supports deep into the rock face itself. These supports, some reaching 40 feet into the mountain, created anchor points that could bear enormous weight while distributing the load across the entire cliff structure. The technique required carving enormous chambers within the rock, chambers that would later serve as storage areas, workshops, and emergency shelters. Each stone block used in these early expansions was individually shaped to fit its specific position, creating joints so precise that they required no mortar to maintain their integrity. The blocks themselves were quarried from the same limestone formation that housed the castle, ensuring perfect color matching and thermal expansion rates. Master stonemasons would spend months shaping a single block, using techniques passed down through generations and tools blessed in sacred ceremonies. The integration of natural cave systems with artificial construction created opportunities that the builders exploited with remarkable creativity. Where natural chambers existed, they were expanded and refined rather than filled in or ignored. This approach not only saved enormous amounts of labor, but also preserved the spiritual significance of the original sacred spaces. The result was a structure that seemed to grow organically from the mountain itself. Water management became a crucial aspect of the castle's expanding design. The natural springs that had first attracted settlers to this location needed to be incorporated into the growing structure without compromising their purity or flow. The builders developed an ingenious system of channels and reservoirs carved directly into the rock, allowing fresh water to flow throughout the castle while maintaining multiple backup sources in case of siege or contamination. The defensive considerations that shaped the castle's architecture were as sophisticated as they were effective. Rather than relying solely on height and thick walls, the builders created multiple layers of defense that took advantage of the natural terrain. The approach to the castle was deliberately convoluted, forcing attackers to expose themselves to defensive fire from multiple angles while navigating narrow passages that could be easily blocked or collapsed. During the Second Golden Age, roughly 8 centuries after the initial construction, the castle underwent its most dramatic expansion. This was the era when the iconic towers that dominate the skyline were first constructed, each one representing not just architectural achievement, but also spiritual symbolism. The central tower, reaching nearly 400 feet above the original foundation, was designed to serve as both a watchtower and a beacon. The construction of these towers required innovations in lifting and transportation that pushed the boundaries of medieval engineering. The builders developed a system of pulleys and counterweights that could raise massive stone blocks to unprecedented heights. The counterweight system was particularly ingenious, using the natural springs within the mountain to fill enormous water reservoirs that provided the necessary force to lift building materials. Each tower served multiple purposes beyond simple observation and defense. The northern tower housed the royal library, its multiple levels providing space for thousands of scrolls and books, while the height protected these precious documents from flood and fire. The eastern tower contained workshops for the finest craftsmen in the kingdom, while the western tower served as a diplomatic center with guest quarters for visiting dignitaries. The southern tower, the tallest of all, was reserved for the most sacred purposes. Its upper chambers served as an observatory where court astronomers tracked the movements of celestial bodies and maintained the complex calendar systems that governed religious festivals and agricultural cycles. The connection between astronomical observation and royal authority wasn't merely symbolic. Accurate predictions of eclipses, planetary alignments, and seasonal changes were crucial for maintaining the population's faith in divine mandate. The visual impact of these towers was carefully considered by their designers. Each one was positioned to create pleasing proportions when viewed from the most important approaches to the castle, following mathematical principles that created harmony and balance in the overall composition. The towers weren't identical in design. Each incorporated subtle variations that reflected their individual purposes while maintaining overall unity. The expansion of the castle's footprint during this era required extensive modification of the original cliff face. Master engineers developed techniques for carving away portions of the mountain while preserving structural integrity, creating terraced levels that provided space for courtyards, gardens, and additional buildings. These terraces were connected by a complex system of stairs and ramps carved directly into the rock. The roofing systems developed for the castle represented another area of significant innovation. The traditional materials available in the region weren't suitable for structures of this scale, leading to the development of a unique ceramic tile system that provided both weather protection and fire resistance. These tiles were fired in kilns built specifically for castle construction, using clay deposits found in the mountain itself. The interior spaces of the expanded castle required careful planning to maintain both functionality and spiritual significance. The builders developed a complex system of corridors and chambers that allowed for efficient movement throughout the structure while preserving areas of sacred importance. Major ceremonial spaces were positioned to take advantage of natural lighting at specific times of day, creating dramatic effects during important rituals and celebrations. Ventilation throughout the massive structure was achieved through an ingenious system of air shafts and thermal chimneys that used the natural temperature differences within the mountain to create airflow. These systems were completely hidden from view, but provided fresh air to every inhabited space within the castle. The air shafts also served double duty as communication channels, allowing messages to be passed quickly between different levels and sections of the castle. The decorative elements incorporated into the castle's architecture weren't merely ornamental. They served important cultural and spiritual functions. Relief carvings on exterior walls told the stories of great kings and queens, serving as visual history lessons for visitors and citizens. Interior frescoes depicted religious scenes and historical events, creating environments that reinforced the sacred nature of royal authority. The influence of different cultural traditions can be seen throughout the castle's architecture, reflecting the diverse population of the growing kingdom. Elements borrowed from neighboring cultures were integrated in ways that enhanced rather than competed with the underlying Hylian aesthetic. These influences weren't random adoptions, but careful selections that served specific functional or symbolic purposes. The architectural legacy of Hyrule Castle extends far beyond its physical presence. The techniques developed during its construction, the aesthetic principles embodied in its design, and the integration of spiritual and practical considerations created a template for monumental architecture that influenced building traditions for thousands of years. The royal family's living quarters within Hyrule Castle represent far more than mere rooms and chambers. They embody the delicate balance between public duty and private sanctuary that defines royal existence. These spaces, evolved over countless generations, tell the intimate story of how kings and queens lived, loved, and ruled from within walls that were simultaneously fortress, palace, and home. Princess Zelda's chambers have undergone numerous transformations throughout the castle's history, each reflecting both the personality of its occupant and the changing needs of different eras. The earliest iterations of the princess's quarters were modest by later standards, consisting of 3 interconnected rooms carved directly into the mountain's heart. These chambers prioritized security over luxury, with thick stone walls and limited access points that could be easily defended during times of crisis. As the kingdom grew in prosperity and threats to royal safety diminished, successive generations expanded and refined these quarters. The chambers we see today represent the culmination of centuries of careful modification and enhancement. The princess's bedroom evolved from a simple sleeping space into a complex suite that includes private bathing areas fed by the mountain's natural springs, a personal library containing rare texts and research materials, and meditation spaces designed for communion with the goddesses. The most striking feature of Princess Zelda's quarters is the series of tall windows that offer panoramic views across the kingdom. These windows weren't mere architectural flourishes. They served crucial, practical, and symbolic purposes. From her chambers, the princess could observe the daily life of her people, watching the movements of merchants, farmers, and travelers that indicated the kingdom's health and prosperity. During times of conflict, these same windows provided early warning of approaching threats. The private study within Zelda's quarters deserves particular attention for its role in shaping the intellectual development of countless princesses throughout history. This room, with its carefully controlled lighting and acoustically perfect proportions, was designed specifically for scholarly pursuits. The walls were lined with custom-built shelving that could accommodate everything from ancient scrolls to modern bound volumes, while specialized storage areas protected delicate instruments used for magical research and astronomical observation. The throne room stands as perhaps the most important ceremonial space within the entire castle, a chamber where architecture serves to reinforce the divine nature of royal authority. The room's proportions follow sacred mathematical principles, with the height of the ceiling bearing specific relationships to the width and length that were believed to create harmonious resonances pleasing to the goddesses. The throne itself, carved from a single piece of sacred stone and positioned at the exact center of the chamber, serves as the focal point for all ceremonial activities. The approach to the throne was carefully designed to create maximum psychological impact on visitors. The main entrance requires ascending a series of broad steps that force visitors to look upward toward the throne, emphasizing the elevated status of the monarch. The acoustics of the chamber amplify the ruler's voice while creating subtle echoes that add weight and authority to royal pronouncements. Natural lighting from high windows creates dramatic effects throughout the day, with the throne receiving direct illumination during the hours when court was traditionally held. Behind the public grandeur of the throne room lay the private quarters where the royal family conducted their daily lives away from the scrutiny of court officials and visiting dignitaries. These spaces prioritized comfort and intimacy over ceremonial magnificence, creating environments where rulers could relax and interact with their families as human beings rather than symbols of divine authority. The private dining hall featured a more modest table, suitable for family meals, with simple but elegant furnishings that encouraged casual conversation. The royal bedchambers evolved significantly over the centuries, adapting to changing customs and security requirements. Early versions were essentially fortified rooms with minimal comfort, designed primarily to protect sleeping rulers from assassination attempts. Later iterations incorporated luxury elements while maintaining security features, including hidden passages that allowed for emergency evacuation and secret chambers where valuable items could be concealed during sieges. The royal family's private quarters included specialized spaces that reflected the unique demands of ruling a magical kingdom. The divination chamber, accessible only to members of the royal bloodline, contained crystal formations that amplified magical abilities and scrying pools fed by the sacred springs. This room served as a private sanctuary where rulers could commune with the spirits of their ancestors and seek guidance on matters of state that required divine wisdom. Daily life within these royal quarters followed rhythms that balanced public duties with private needs. Morning routines began before dawn with private prayers and meditation in chambers specifically designed for spiritual communion. The royal family would then proceed to more public areas of the castle for official duties, returning to their private quarters for meals, rest, and family time. Evening hours were often spent in the private library or study, where rulers could pursue personal interests and continue their education in matters of statecraft and scholarship. The castle's role as both fortress and home created unique challenges for royal family life. Children born within these walls grew up in an environment where every room served multiple purposes, and every corridor might become a defensive position during times of crisis. Royal nurseries were designed with escape routes and safe rooms, while children's play areas were incorporated into the castle's defensive plans. This dual nature of their home environment shaped the character of royal children, teaching them from an early age that privilege came with responsibility. The royal gardens and courtyards represented attempts to bring nature into the stone fortress, creating spaces where the royal family could experience beauty and tranquility without leaving the castle's protection. These gardens weren't merely decorative, they served practical purposes as sources of medicinal herbs and food during sieges. The design of these outdoor spaces required careful consideration of defensive requirements, with sight lines maintained for guards and multiple access points that could be sealed during attacks. The recreational areas within the royal quarters evolved to serve both entertainment and education purposes. The royal game room contained strategy games that sharpened tactical thinking, while the music chamber provided space for both performance and instruction in the arts. Physical fitness was maintained through indoor training areas that doubled as defensive positions, ensuring that members of the royal family could contribute to the castle's defense if necessary. The evolution of royal living standards across generations reflected broader changes in the kingdom's prosperity and technological advancement. Early royal quarters emphasized survival and security above all else, while later versions incorporated luxury elements that demonstrated the kingdom's growing wealth and stability. However, even the most opulent periods maintained the underlying principle that royal quarters must serve both private and public functions, personal and ceremonial purposes. The royal quarters stand today as testament to the evolution of royal life within Hyrule Castle, spaces that successfully balance the competing demands of security and comfort, public duty and private need. They represent the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who understood that effective leadership required both the strength to face external threats and the peace to nurture internal wisdom. Beneath the grandeur of Hyrule Castle's towering spires and magnificent halls lies a hidden world that few have ever glimpsed, an intricate network of tunnels, passages, and chambers that transforms the fortress into something far more complex than its surface appearance might suggest. These concealed arteries of stone and shadow weren't afterthoughts added to an existing structure, but integral components planned and carved with the same care and precision that shaped every visible aspect of the castle above. The extensive tunnel system beneath the castle represents one of the most remarkable engineering achievements in Hyrule's history. A three-dimensional maze that extends far beyond the castle's visible footprint. These passages burrow deep into the mountain's heart, following natural fissures and artificial corridors that connect distant chambers in ways that would confuse even experienced navigators. The total length of these tunnels, if laid end to end, would stretch for dozens of miles, creating a secondary castle that exists entirely within the earth. The primary network of tunnels serves multiple interconnected purposes, each passage designed with specific functions that contribute to the castle's overall defensive strategy. The main arterial tunnels are wide enough for armed soldiers to move quickly between different sections of the castle, without using the more exposed above-ground corridors. These passages maintain consistent heights of 8 feet and widths of 6 feet, dimensions that allow for efficient troop movement while remaining small enough to be easily defended at choke points. Emergency escape routes represent perhaps the most crucial element of the tunnel system, providing multiple pathways for the royal family and essential personnel to evacuate the castle during sieges or other catastrophic events. These routes weren't simple straight-line connections, but carefully planned paths that included rest areas, supply caches, and defensive positions. The longest escape route extends nearly 3 miles from the royal quarters to a concealed exit in the foothills beyond the castle, emerging through a hidden cave entrance that appears to be nothing more than a natural rock formation. The strategic military advantages provided by these hidden passageways cannot be overstated. During times of siege, defenders could move reinforcements to threatened areas without exposing them to enemy observation or missile fire. Surprise attacks could be launched from unexpected directions, with strike forces emerging from concealed entrances to attack besieging armies from behind. The psychological impact on enemies was equally important. The knowledge that defenders might emerge from anywhere at any time created constant anxiety among attacking forces. Secret entrances and exits throughout the castle grounds were masterfully concealed within the natural and artificial landscape. Some were hidden behind false walls in storage rooms, accessible only to those who knew the precise sequence of hidden levers and counterweights that opened the concealed doors. Others were camouflaged as decorative elements, with entrance passages hidden behind rotating sections of carved stone panels that appeared to be permanent architectural features. The most ingenious secret entrances were those integrated into the castle's water management system. Several passages could be accessed through concealed openings in the walls of artificial ponds and decorative fountains, requiring individuals to submerge themselves completely to reach the entrance points. These underwater entrances were particularly valuable because they remained accessible even when the castle was under close surveillance, as enemies rarely thought to examine the depths of ornamental water features. The network connecting different areas of the castle through underground passages creates redundant pathways that ensure communication and movement can continue even when surface routes are compromised. The throne room connects to the royal quarters through no fewer than 5 separate tunnel routes, each taking different paths and including different defensive features. Similarly, the armory connects to major defensive positions throughout the castle through a web of passages that allow weapons and ammunition to be distributed quickly during emergencies. The construction of these tunnels required solving complex engineering challenges related to structural stability, ventilation, and water management. The builders carved through solid rock in some areas, while carefully shoring up softer soil in others, using techniques that prevented cave-ins while maintaining secrecy. The ventilation systems they developed used natural air currents and temperature differentials to provide fresh air throughout the tunnel network, without creating obvious surface vents that might reveal their existence. Underground chambers, carved specifically for storage and refuge, dot the tunnel network at strategic intervals. These chambers, some large enough to accommodate dozens of people, were provisioned with emergency supplies, including food, water, weapons, and medical materials. The largest of these underground refuges, known as the Great Chamber, spans an area roughly equivalent to the throne room above, and was designed to shelter the entire royal family and their closest advisors for extended periods during sieges. The network extends beyond simple transportation corridors to include specialized facilities that support the castle's operations. Underground workshops provided secure locations for crafting sensitive items like weapons and magical implements, while hidden armories stored reserve supplies away from potential enemy raids. Several chambers were dedicated to food storage, their natural cool temperatures and controlled humidity, ideal for preserving supplies that might be needed during extended sieges. Mining operations conducted beneath the castle over the centuries created additional tunnels and chambers, many of which were later incorporated into the defensive network. These excavations, originally intended to extract building stone and precious metals, revealed natural cave systems that expanded the available underground space. The miners who worked these tunnels developed specialized techniques for working in confined spaces while maintaining structural integrity, knowledge that proved invaluable when expanding the defensive tunnel network. The discovery of ancient Sheikah technology chambers deep beneath the castle added new dimensions to the underground network. These chambers, carved by unknown hands in ages past, contained technological marvels that suggested advanced civilizations had used this location long before the current castle was built. The integration of these ancient spaces into the modern tunnel system required careful study and modification to ensure compatibility with existing defensive plans. Water management throughout the tunnel network presented unique challenges that the builders solved with characteristic ingenuity. Natural springs and underground streams had to be channeled and controlled to prevent flooding while preserving access to fresh water throughout the system. The builders created a complex system of channels, dams, and overflow areas that managed water flow during both normal conditions and seasonal variations. Several tunnels actually follow the courses of underground streams, with walkways built along the water channels to provide both transportation routes and access to fresh water. The lighting systems developed for the tunnel network balanced the need for illumination with the requirement for secrecy. Permanent torch fixtures were placed at regular intervals throughout the main passages, with special ventilation shafts that dispersed smoke to prevent detection from the surface. Oil-fed lamps provided more controlled lighting in sensitive areas, while polished metal mirrors redirected natural light from concealed openings into the deepest chambers. Communication throughout the tunnel network relied on both technological and human solutions. Speaking tubes carved into the tunnel walls allowed messages to be passed quickly between distant areas, while trained runners maintained regular communication schedules. Emergency signal systems using bells and coded drum beats could alert the entire network to threats or coordinate defensive actions across multiple tunnel segments simultaneously. The defensive features integrated into the tunnel system demonstrate the sophisticated military thinking that guided their construction. Narrow passages could be blocked by single defenders, while wider areas included prepared positions, where small groups could hold off much larger forces. False tunnels and dead-end passages were constructed to confuse enemies who might discover the system, leading intruders into traps or simply wasting their time and resources on fruitless exploration. The hidden passages and secret networks beneath Hyrule Castle represent far more than simple military engineering. They embody the foresight and wisdom of builders who understood that true security requires multiple layers of protection and backup plans for every contingency. These tunnels ensured that the castle could continue to function even under the most adverse conditions, providing options and capabilities that enemies could never fully anticipate or counter. The defensive systems and military architecture of Hyrule Castle represent the culmination of centuries of strategic thinking, engineering innovation, and hard-learned lessons from countless conflicts. Every tower, wall, and fortification was designed not merely to impress visitors, but to create an integrated defensive network capable of withstanding the most determined sieges while projecting power across the entire kingdom. The guard towers that punctuate the castle's perimeter weren't positioned randomly, but according to mathematical principles that maximize their effectiveness, while minimizing blind spots and resource requirements. Each tower was placed to provide overlapping fields of fire with its neighbors, creating zones where attackers would face concentrated defensive fire from multiple directions simultaneously. The spacing between towers followed precise calculations based on the effective range of the period's most common missile weapons, ensuring that no section of the castle's walls could be approached without exposure to defensive fire. The height of these towers served multiple strategic purposes beyond simple observation advantages. The elevated positions allowed defenders to see approaching threats from enormous distances, providing crucial early warning time that could mean the difference between successful defense and catastrophic surprise. The psychological impact of these towering structures was equally important, as their imposing presence reminded both enemies and allies of the castle's strength and the kingdom's power to project force across great distances. The castle's role as Hyrule's primary military stronghold required it to serve functions far beyond simple defense. The fortress needed to house and supply the kingdom's central military forces while serving as a command center for operations throughout the realm. This dual role influenced every aspect of its design, from the size of its courtyards to the capacity of its storage facilities and the sophistication of its communication systems. The main defensive walls that surround the castle represent engineering achievements that push the boundaries of medieval construction techniques. These walls, reaching heights of up to 60 feet in some sections, were built using a revolutionary layered construction method that created unprecedented strength while conserving materials. The outer facing consisted of massive cut stone blocks fitted together with precision joints, while the interior was filled with smaller stones and mortar in a configuration that distributed impact forces throughout the entire wall structure. The thickness of these walls varied according to their strategic importance and exposure to attack. The most vulnerable sections, those facing the most likely approaches for siege engines and assault forces, featured walls up to 20 feet thick at their base. These massive barriers were designed to withstand prolonged bombardment from the largest siege weapons, while providing stable platforms for the castle's own defensive artillery. Defensive measures against aerial attacks demonstrated the builders' understanding that threats could come from any direction. The castle's towers were equipped with specialized ballista designed to target flying enemies, while the upper battlements featured covered positions that protected defenders from aerial assault while allowing them to return fire. The design of these anti-aerial defenses reflected hard-won experience, from conflicts where enemies had employed flying creatures or magical transportation to bypass traditional ground-based defenses. Ground-based defensive systems created multiple layers of obstacles that forced attackers to expose themselves to concentrated fire while struggling to advance. The approach routes to the castle were deliberately constricted at key points, creating bottlenecks where small numbers of defenders could hold off much larger attacking forces. These choke points were reinforced with prepared defensive positions, storage areas for additional ammunition and supplies, and emergency escape routes that allowed defenders to withdraw to secondary positions if their initial positions became untenable. The famous guardian pillars that surrounded the castle during certain periods represent one of the most innovative defensive systems ever deployed in the kingdom's history. These massive structures, rising from deep underground storage chambers, housed mechanical defenders that could emerge when activated by approaching threats. The engineering required to create these pillars and their hidden storage systems pushed the boundaries of both conventional construction and magical technology. The guardian storage chambers beneath each pillar were marvels of engineering that solved complex problems related to preservation, activation, and deployment. These underground facilities maintained the mechanical defenders in perfect condition for thousands of years, while providing rapid deployment systems that could place active guardians in defensive positions within minutes of activation. The storage chambers included maintenance facilities, power sources, and control systems that operated automatically according to predetermined threat assessment protocols. Weapon storage throughout the castle was organized according to military doctrine that emphasized rapid distribution during emergencies while maintaining security during peacetime. The main armory, carved deep into the mountain's heart, housed thousands of weapons ranging from simple spears and swords to sophisticated siege engines and magical implements. The storage systems were designed to allow quick retrieval of specific weapon types while preventing unauthorized access through multiple layers of physical and magical security. Training grounds within the castle complex served the dual purpose of maintaining military readiness while testing new defensive concepts and tactics. These areas were designed to simulate various combat scenarios, from close quarters fighting in narrow corridors to large-scale battlefield maneuvers in open courtyards. The training facilities included specialized equipment for testing new weapons and defensive techniques, ensuring that the castle's defenders remained current with evolving military technology and tactics. The Royal Guard training programs conducted within these facilities were among the most rigorous in the known world, combining physical conditioning with tactical education and specialized skills training. Potential guards underwent months of intensive preparation that tested not only their combat abilities, but also their loyalty, judgment, and ability to function under extreme stress. The training grounds included obstacle courses that replicated the castle's defensive terrain, allowing guards to become intimately familiar with every corridor, stairway, and defensive position they might need to use during actual conflicts. The famous lockup facility represents one of the most innovative approaches to military training ever developed within the castle. This underground chamber, designed specifically for testing potential knights through combat trials, featured a controlled environment where candidates faced predetermined challenges under carefully monitored conditions. The facility included holding areas for the test subjects, observation positions for evaluators, and safety systems that prevented training exercises from becoming unnecessarily lethal. Military innovations developed within the castle walls influenced defensive thinking throughout the kingdom and beyond. The castle served as a testing ground for new weapons, tactics, and defensive technologies that were later adopted by other fortifications across the realm. The concentration of skilled craftsmen, engineers, and military theorists within the castle created an environment where innovation flourished and practical experience informed theoretical development. The siege resistance capabilities built into the castle's design reflected deep understanding of the logistics and psychology of prolonged conflicts. The fortress was designed to remain self-sufficient for extended periods, with food storage, water sources, and manufacturing capabilities that could sustain the defenders indefinitely. These provisions weren't merely practical necessities, but psychological weapons that demonstrated to enemies the futility of attempting to starve the defenders into submission. The castle's offensive capabilities were equally sophisticated, featuring systems that allowed defenders to project force far beyond the fortress walls. Catapults and ballista positioned on the highest towers could strike targets at extreme range, while sally ports, hidden throughout the defensive perimeter, allowed strike forces to emerge unexpectedly and attack besieging enemies from behind. These offensive systems were integrated with the overall defensive plan to create coordinated responses that maximize the effectiveness of the castle's limited garrison against potentially much larger attacking forces. The defensive systems stand today as testament to the foresight and skill of their creators, structures that successfully balance the competing demands of military effectiveness, resource efficiency, and symbolic power. They represent the accumulated wisdom of generations who understood that true security requires not just strong walls and sharp weapons, but comprehensive planning, continuous innovation, and unwavering dedication to the principles that make defense necessary in the first place. The castle's role in Hyrule's major conflicts reveals a story written in stone and blood, where ancient walls bore witness to the kingdom's greatest triumphs and most devastating defeats. Each battle, siege, and war left its mark upon the fortress, shaping not only its physical structure, but also the very soul of the nation it protected. The castle stood as more than a military target. It was the symbolic heart of the kingdom, and control of its towers meant control of Hyrule itself. The ancient battle with Demise represents the foundational conflict that would define the castle's destiny for millennia to come. During this primordial struggle between divine forces and demonic power, the castle served as humanity's final sanctuary against annihilation. The fortress that existed during this era was far more primitive than later incarnations, consisting primarily of reinforced natural caves and basic stone fortifications. Yet it provided the crucial refuge where the first hero made his final preparations for the battle that would determine the fate of all creation. The castle's strategic importance during the Demise conflict stemmed not from its military strength, but from its spiritual significance as a convergence point of divine power. The sacred springs that flow beneath the mountain provided purification for both body and spirit, while the elevated position allowed communion with the goddesses themselves. Here, the first hero received the blessings and weapons necessary to challenge a force that threatened to consume the world in eternal darkness and flame. The physical changes wrought upon the castle during this conflict were subtle but profound. The very stones of the mountain absorbed residual divine energy from the battle, imbuing the fortress with protective properties that would shield it from supernatural threats for generations to come. The underground chambers where the hero prepared for his final confrontation became sacred spaces, shrines where future warriors would seek blessing and guidance before their own battles against darkness. The timeline split events that fractured Hyrule's history into parallel streams placed enormous strain upon the castle's role as a symbol of royal continuity and divine mandate. In each timeline, the fortress faced different challenges and underwent different modifications, yet certain core elements remained constant across all possible futures. The castle's ability to adapt to dramatically different circumstances while maintaining its essential character demonstrates the wisdom of its original designers, who built flexibility into its very foundations. In the timeline where the hero fell, the castle became a desperate fortress of resistance against Ganon's spreading dominion. The modifications made during this period prioritized survival over grandeur, with new defensive systems carved hastily into the mountain and emergency provisions stockpiled in every available chamber. The royal family's chambers were relocated deeper underground, while the upper levels were converted into military command centers from which the remaining free forces of Hyrule coordinated their guerrilla resistance. The adult timeline saw the castle face the Great Flood, perhaps the most catastrophic challenge in its entire history. As the waters rose to cleanse the world of Ganon's corruption, the castle's elevated position initially provided sanctuary for refugees fleeing the rising seas. The fortress became an ark of sorts, sheltering the last remnants of Hylian civilization as the familiar world disappeared beneath endless waves. The castle's final moments in this timeline, as it too succumbed to the divine flood, marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in the saga of Hyrule. The child timeline presented different challenges as the castle adapted to prevent the very conflicts that had devastated other possible futures. The modifications made during this period focused on intelligence gathering and early warning systems, with new towers and communication networks designed to detect threats before they could mature into existential dangers. The castle became not just a fortress, but a center of diplomatic activity where potential conflicts could be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Calamity Ganon's return 10,000 years ago transformed the castle from a symbol of peace into a battlefield, where the ultimate struggle between light and darkness played out across generations. The Sheikah technology that was integrated into the castle's defenses during this period represented a revolutionary advancement in military engineering, combining ancient wisdom with cutting-edge innovation to create defensive systems unlike anything the world had ever seen. The guardian pillars that rose from deep beneath the castle grounds during this conflict weren't merely weapons, but symbols of humanity's determination to defend itself through ingenuity and preparation. These massive structures, housing hundreds of mechanical defenders, demonstrated that the castle could adapt to face threats that exceeded the capabilities of conventional military forces. The engineering required to create these underground storage and deployment systems pushed the boundaries of both magical and mechanical technology. The psychological impact of the castle's transformation during the calamity cannot be understated. Citizens throughout the kingdom drew hope from the sight of the guardian pillars rising around their capital, visible proof that their leaders had not been idle during the long peace, but had prepared carefully for the darkness they knew would one day return. The castle became a beacon of technological might that promised salvation through human achievement and divine guidance, working in harmony. The siege of the castle by Calamity Ganon's forces lasted for months, with the fortress serving as the final bastion of organized resistance against the spreading corruption. The defensive systems performed exactly as designed, with guardian forces emerging from their concealed positions to engage the enemy across multiple fronts simultaneously. The battle raged not just on the surface, but throughout the tunnel networks beneath the castle, where human defenders fought desperately to prevent the corruption from reaching the deepest sacred chambers. The castle's ultimate fall during this conflict marked one of the darkest moments in Hyrule's history, yet even in defeat, the fortress served its purpose. The time bought by its resistance allowed evacuations to succeed and provided cover for the implementation of contingency plans that would preserve hope for future generations. The castle's sacrifice demonstrated that true victory sometimes requires accepting temporary defeat in service of longer-term survival. The corruption that followed Ganon's victory transformed the castle into a twisted mockery of its former glory, with malice seeping through its stones and guardian forces turned against their creators. Yet even in this darkest hour, the castle's fundamental structure endured, protected by the divine blessings woven into its very foundations. The spiritual energy that had consecrated the fortress in its earliest days proved stronger than the corruption that sought to claim it. The strategic importance of controlling the castle during conflicts extended far beyond its immediate military value. Possession of the fortress conveyed legitimacy upon whoever held it, marking them as the rightful ruler of Hyrule in the eyes of both allies and enemies. This symbolic power made the castle a target that enemies felt compelled to capture rather than simply bypass, often leading them to expend enormous resources on sieges that might have been avoided through different strategic approaches. The siege warfare techniques developed specifically for attacking or defending the castle influenced military doctrine throughout the region and across the centuries. The fortress's unique combination of natural and artificial defenses required attackers to develop new approaches and technologies, while defenders learned to exploit every advantage offered by the terrain and architecture. These innovations spread to other fortifications, raising the general standard of defensive architecture throughout the kingdom. The recovery and rebuilding efforts that followed each major conflict demonstrated the castle's importance to Hyrulean identity and national morale. No matter how severe the damage or how complete the destruction, successive generations found the resources and determination to restore the fortress to its former glory. These reconstruction projects weren't merely practical necessities, but acts of faith that affirmed the kingdom's commitment to its values and its confidence in its future. The lessons learned from each conflict were incorporated into subsequent modifications and expansions of the castle's defenses. Battle damage was repaired in ways that strengthened vulnerable points, while new threats identified during combat led to the development of countermeasures and defensive innovations. The castle became a living laboratory where military doctrine evolved through direct experience rather than theoretical speculation. The role of the castle in protecting the kingdom during invasions extended beyond its function as a military stronghold to encompass its importance as a symbol of resistance and hope. The sight of the fortress standing unconquered provided psychological strength to defenders throughout the kingdom, while its fall could devastate morale across entire armies. This symbolic power made the castle's defense a matter of strategic importance that transcended its immediate tactical value. The evolution of the castle's defenses in response to changing military technology and tactics created a layered history of innovation and adaptation. Each generation of military engineers added their own contributions while preserving the accumulated wisdom of their predecessors. The result was a defensive system that remained effective across centuries of changing threats, while maintaining the essential character that made the castle a symbol of Hyrulean values and determination. The castle's survival through conflicts that destroyed entire civilizations elsewhere demonstrates both the skill of its builders and the spiritual protection that safeguards it. The fortress stands today not merely as a military achievement, but as a testament to the principle that some things are worth defending, regardless of the cost. Through every siege, every battle, and every war, The castle has embodied the determination of the Hyrulean people to preserve their way of life and protect their most sacred values against any threat that darkness might bring. The sacred spaces and religious significance of Hyrule Castle extend far beyond its role as a fortress or royal residence, transforming the entire structure into a living temple where the divine and mortal realms intersect. Every stone, every chamber, and every architectural element serves not only practical purposes, but also spiritual functions that connect the earthly kingdom to the eternal realm of the goddesses. The castle's connection to the Triforce represents the most fundamental aspect of its spiritual significance, with the entire structure serving as a terrestrial anchor for divine power. The three central towers of the castle were deliberately positioned to mirror the triangular configuration of the Triforce itself, creating a geometric resonance that amplifies the spiritual energy flowing through the fortress. This arrangement wasn't merely symbolic, but functional, channeling divine power through the castle's architecture in ways that strengthen both its physical defenses and its spiritual protections. The positioning of these towers follows sacred mathematical principles that were revealed through divine inspiration rather than human calculation. The distances between tower centers, the angles of their placement, and their relative heights all correspond to mystical ratios that appear throughout Hyrulean religious architecture. These proportions create harmonic resonances that can be felt by those sensitive to spiritual energies, generating subtle vibrations that promote peace, wisdom, and connection to divine truth. Sacred chambers throughout the castle serve as focal points for different aspects of divine worship and royal ceremony. The Chamber of Wisdom, located deep within the northern tower, houses crystal formations that amplify the intellectual and spiritual development of those who meditate within its walls. The acoustics of this chamber are perfectly tuned to enhance contemplation, with even the slightest whisper carrying clearly throughout the space, while outside noise is completely excluded. The Chamber of Power, built into the Western Tower's foundation, serves as a place where the physical and spiritual strength of the royal bloodline is tested and renewed. Here, ancient rituals connect the ruling monarch to the warrior traditions of their ancestors, while ensuring that earthly authority remains grounded in divine approval. The chamber contains implements of both ceremony and combat, reflecting the dual nature of royal responsibility as both spiritual and temporal leadership. The Chamber of Courage, carved into the living rock beneath the eastern tower, provides sanctuary for those facing impossible challenges or making decisions that will affect the entire kingdom. The spiritual energy within this chamber strengthens resolve and clarifies purpose, helping visitors find the inner strength necessary to face whatever destiny requires of them. The walls of this chamber bear inscriptions of ancient prayers and blessings that have accumulated spiritual power over centuries of use. The role of the castle in royal ceremonies extends far beyond providing an impressive backdrop for state functions. The structure itself participates in these rituals through architectural features designed to channel and focus divine energy at crucial moments. The coronation chamber features a circular opening in its ceiling that aligns perfectly with specific celestial events, allowing divine light to illuminate new monarchs at the moment they accept their sacred responsibilities. The spiritual significance of the castle's placement on this particular mountain relates to ancient legends that describe this location as one of the original landing sites of the goddesses when they first shaped the world. The natural springs that flow from deep within the mountain are believed to carry traces of divine tears shed during the creation process, making their waters sacred and imbuing them with healing properties that extend beyond mere physical restoration. Sacred springs throughout the castle complex serve multiple religious and ceremonial purposes, their pure waters used for blessing, purification, and healing rituals that have been performed continuously for thousands of years. The largest of these springs, known as the Heart of the Mountain, feeds all the smaller water sources within the castle and serves as the primary site for the most important royal ceremonies. The water from this spring is used to anoint new rulers, bless royal marriages, and perform the naming ceremonies for newborn members of the royal family. The temples and shrines within the castle grounds represent different aspects of divine worship while maintaining unity through shared architectural principles and spiritual purpose. The Temple of Time, when it existed near the castle, served as the primary location for ceremonies involving the Master Sword and other sacred artifacts. Its connection to the castle created a spiritual network that strengthened both structures while providing a complete center for the kingdom's religious life. Smaller shrines throughout the castle complex honor different aspects of divine power and provide spaces for private worship and meditation. These shrines aren't merely decorative additions, but functional spiritual centers where castle residents can maintain their connection to divine guidance through daily prayer and contemplation. Each shrine reflects the particular needs and traditions of those who use it most frequently, creating diverse expressions of unified faith. The spiritual protection provided by the castle's consecrated architecture serves as a barrier against malevolent forces that might threaten the kingdom through supernatural means. The blessing ceremonies performed during the castle's construction wove protective enchantments into its very stones, creating defenses that operate independently of human intervention. These spiritual barriers have proven effective against corruption, possession, and other forms of dark magic that conventional defenses cannot address. The role of the castle in maintaining Hyrule's spiritual balance extends to its function as a repository for sacred knowledge and artifacts. The royal library contains not only books and scrolls, but also blessed objects, ceremonial implements, and relics that hold spiritual significance for the entire kingdom. The preservation of these items within the castle's protected environment ensures that future generations will have access to the accumulated wisdom and spiritual resources of their ancestors. Royal burial sites within the castle grounds reflect the belief that departed monarchs continue to serve their kingdom even after death, their spirits providing guidance and protection from beyond the mortal realm. These burial chambers aren't merely tombs, but active spiritual centers where the living can commune with the dead through prayer and meditation. The architecture of these spaces facilitates such communication while ensuring that the rest enjoyed by royal spirits remains undisturbed. The castle's connection to the Master Sword represents one of its most profound spiritual relationships, linking the fortress to the legendary blade that serves as the ultimate symbol of divine approval and heroic destiny. When the sword rests in its pedestal, Spiritual energy flows between it and the castle, strengthening both while maintaining the sacred balance necessary for the kingdom's protection. This connection ensures that the castle and the sword support each other's purposes in the eternal struggle against darkness. The astronomical alignments built into the castle's architecture serve religious as well as practical purposes, marking important dates in the spiritual calendar and facilitating ceremonies that require specific celestial conditions. The castle serves as a massive sundial and calendar, its shadows and light patterns indicating the proper times for various religious observances. These alignments also create opportunities for enhanced spiritual communication during eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and other astronomical events. The sacred spaces within Hyrule Castle stand as testament to the principle that true strength comes not from weapons or walls, but from alignment with divine purpose and commitment to eternal values. Through centuries of worship, ceremony, and spiritual practice, these chambers have accumulated power that transcends their physical construction, creating a spiritual fortress that protects not just the kingdom's territory, but its very soul. The daily life and operations within Hyrule Castle encompassed far more than the ceremonial duties and military functions that captured public attention. Beneath the grandeur lay a complex ecosystem of human activity that sustained one of the largest and most sophisticated institutions in the known world. The castle functioned as a self-contained city where hundreds of individuals worked together to maintain not only the physical structure, but also the intricate web of services and systems that enabled the royal family to govern effectively. The vast network of servants, guards, and staff who called the castle home represented every level of society and nearly every skilled trade practiced throughout the kingdom. Master craftsmen worked alongside apprentices, learning their trades, while experienced administrators collaborated with young scribes, eager to understand the complexities of governance. This diverse community created a microcosm of Hyrulean society, where social boundaries were softened by shared purpose and mutual dependence, though hierarchies remained clearly defined and carefully maintained. The organizational structure that governed castle operations had evolved over centuries to balance efficiency with security while accommodating the unique requirements of royal residents. The Chamberlain served as the chief administrator, overseeing all non-military aspects of castle life and reporting directly to the royal family on matters of household management, staff supervision, and resource allocation. Beneath the Chamberlain, department heads managed specialized areas including food service, maintenance, cleaning, and guest services. Kitchen operations within the castle represented one of the most complex and demanding aspects of daily life, requiring constant coordination between multiple teams of specialists who prepared meals for hundreds of residents, while maintaining the ability to accommodate royal banquets, diplomatic dinners, and emergency situations. The main kitchens occupied vast chambers carved deep into the mountain, where natural cooling helped preserve food, while massive hearths and ovens provided the heat necessary for large-scale cooking operations. The feeding of the castle population required sophisticated planning and resource management that began with agricultural coordination throughout the kingdom. Castle administrators maintained detailed records of seasonal crop cycles, livestock breeding schedules, and regional specialties that allowed them to plan menus months in advance while ensuring adequate nutrition for all residents. Special dietary requirements for the royal family, visiting dignitaries, and individuals with specific medical needs added complexity to meal planning that required both creativity and diplomatic sensitivity. Food preparation teams worked in carefully coordinated shifts that began before dawn and continued until well after midnight, ensuring that meals were available at all hours for guards, staff, and residents whose duties required irregular schedules. The complexity of these operations rivaled those of major restaurants, yet they operated under security constraints that required background checks for all personnel and strict protocols for handling ingredients that might be targeted for sabotage or poisoning. The castle's self-sufficiency during sieges represented one of its most crucial capabilities, requiring permanent stockpiles of preserved foods, emergency water sources, and backup systems for food preparation that could function even if primary kitchens were damaged or compromised. Storage chambers throughout the castle complex housed enormous quantities of grain, dried meats, preserved vegetables, and other non-perishable foods that could sustain the entire population for months if necessary. Maintenance and upkeep of such a massive structure required permanent teams of skilled workers who possessed specialized knowledge about the castle's unique construction and systems. Stonemasons worked continuously to repair and replace weathered blocks, while carpenters maintained the wooden elements that supported floors, roofs, and interior structures. Metalworkers kept weapons, tools, and mechanical systems in working order, while glaziers maintained the hundreds of windows that provided light and ventilation throughout the complex. The complexity of maintaining castle systems extended beyond simple repair work to include ongoing improvements and adaptations that kept the fortress current with evolving needs and technologies. Master craftsmen developed new techniques for preserving ancient stonework while incorporating modern innovations that enhanced functionality without compromising historical integrity. These maintenance operations required coordination with military personnel, administrators, and residents to minimize disruption while ensuring that essential systems remained operational at all times. Cleaning operations within the castle employed dozens of workers who maintained standards of hygiene and appearance appropriate for a royal residence, while managing the practical challenges of keeping stone floors, tapestries, and countless other surfaces clean in an environment where hundreds of people lived and worked daily. The cleaning teams developed specialized techniques for different areas of the castle, from the delicate care required for royal chambers to the robust cleaning methods needed for kitchens, stables, and workshops. The social hierarchy within castle walls reflected broader Hyrulean society, while creating its own unique dynamics based on proximity to royal authority and specialized knowledge of castle operations. Senior staff members who had served for decades possessed influence that extended beyond their formal positions, while newcomers needed time to understand both written protocols and unspoken traditions that governed daily interactions. Living quarters for castle staff varied dramatically based on position and seniority, from private chambers for department heads to shared dormitories for junior personnel. These accommodations were designed to maintain appropriate social distinctions while ensuring that all residents enjoyed basic comfort and privacy. The allocation of living space required careful balance between practical considerations and diplomatic sensitivity, as perceived inequities could undermine morale and efficiency. Diplomatic functions that the castle served required specialized staff who understood both Hyrulean customs and the traditions of visiting foreign delegations. Protocol officers coordinated complex ceremonies that honored guests while maintaining royal dignity, while translators and cultural advisors helped navigate the subtle differences in etiquette and expectation that could determine the success or failure of important negotiations. The castle's role as the administrative center of Hyrule required extensive clerical operations that managed everything from tax collection to legal disputes, military recruitment to infrastructure planning. Teams of scribes maintained detailed records using systems that had evolved over centuries to balance accessibility with security, while specialized departments handled correspondence with provincial governors, military commanders, and diplomatic representatives throughout the known world. Seasonal activities within the castle reflected both the agricultural cycles that governed kingdom life and the ceremonial calendar that marked important religious and state occasions. Spring brought increased construction and renovation projects that took advantage of favorable weather, while summer featured diplomatic missions and trade negotiations that benefited from easier travel conditions. Autumn focused on harvest celebrations and preparations for winter, while the cold months emphasized indoor activities, including education, planning, and maintenance projects. The educational functions that the castle served extended beyond formal training for nobles and clergy to include apprenticeship programs that taught practical skills to young people from throughout the kingdom. These programs provided pathways for social advancement while ensuring that the castle maintained access to skilled workers in essential trades and crafts. Healthcare services within the castle required medical personnel who understood both conventional healing techniques and the specialized challenges of treating injuries and illnesses in a fortress environment. The castle's medical facilities included emergency treatment areas, long-term care facilities, and specialized chambers for treating conditions that might affect royal family members or visiting dignitaries. Daily life within Hyrule Castle represented a remarkable achievement in human organization and cooperation, demonstrating how hundreds of individuals from diverse backgrounds could work together effectively in service of shared goals. The systems and traditions that governed castle operations created a model of efficient administration that influenced governmental practices throughout the kingdom, while ensuring that the royal family could fulfill their responsibilities as effective rulers and spiritual leaders. The mysteries, legends, and unexplored secrets of Hyrule Castle form a tapestry of questions that have fascinated scholars, adventurers, and dreamers for countless generations. Despite centuries of exploration and documentation, the fortress continues to guard its deepest secrets with the same determination it has always shown in protecting the kingdom itself. These enigmas range from architectural puzzles that defy explanation to whispered tales of supernatural encounters that blur the line between history and mythology. Unexplained architectural features throughout the castle challenge conventional understanding of both engineering principles and the intentions of their creators. The most perplexing of these is the series of perfectly circular chambers discovered in the deepest levels of the mountain, rooms that appear to have been carved with tools and techniques that leave no recognizable marks on the stone surfaces. These chambers, each exactly 33 feet in diameter, contain no visible entrances or exits beyond the modern tunnels that accidentally breached their walls during excavation projects. The acoustic properties of these mysterious chambers defy logical explanation, as sounds made within them seem to continue reverberating long after their sources have ceased. Visitors report hearing whispers, music, and other sounds that have no apparent origin, while some claim to have heard conversations in languages that predate any known Hylian dialects. The mathematical precision of these chambers' construction suggests deliberate purpose, yet no records exist of their creation or intended function. Another architectural mystery lies in the discovery of load-bearing walls that appear to support nothing, their tops ending in solid rock with no evidence of collapsed structures above them. These walls follow patterns that form complex geometric designs when viewed from above, creating symbols that don't match any known Hyrulean writing system or architectural tradition. The age of these walls predates the earliest known construction in the castle, yet their building techniques show sophistication that rivals the finest craftsmanship of later periods. Local legends surrounding the castle have accumulated over millennia, blending historical events with mythological elements until the boundary between fact and folklore becomes impossible to determine. The most persistent of these tales speaks of the Phantom Court, ghostly figures said to appear in the throne room during times of great crisis, offering counsel to rulers who possess the wisdom to listen and the courage to accept guidance from beyond the mortal realm. These spectral advisors are described as former kings and queens whose dedication to the kingdom transcended death itself, their spirits bound to the castle by oaths of service that not even mortality could break. Witnesses claim these apparitions appear solid and real until touched, at which point they fade like morning mist while leaving behind the lingering scent of ancient roses and the echo of wisdom spoken in voices that carry the authority of ages. The legend of the lost princess adds another layer to the castle's mystique, telling of a royal daughter who vanished without trace during a period of political turmoil centuries ago. According to the tale, she was exploring the castle's deepest tunnels when she discovered a passage that led to realms beyond the mortal world. Her spirit is said to wander the castle still, appearing as a figure in white who guides lost travelers to safety while continuing her eternal search for the way home. Mysterious disappearances within the castle continue to occur with disturbing regularity, though most involve temporary confusion rather than permanent vanishing. Residents and visitors report becoming lost in familiar corridors that seem to rearrange themselves when no one is watching, while others describe finding themselves in rooms that don't appear on any castle maps and can never be located again despite extensive searching. Ghost stories associated with the castle reflect both its long history and the tendency of ancient buildings to accumulate unexplained phenomena over time. The Tower of Echoes earns its name from the voices that can be heard drifting down its spiral staircase on quiet nights, conversations in ancient dialects that seem to replay significant moments from the kingdom's past. These voices never respond to attempts at communication, suggesting they are impressions left by powerful emotions rather than conscious spirits. Hidden treasures rumored to be concealed within the castle range, from practical valuables to artifacts of immense historical and magical significance. The crown jewels of the ancient kings supposedly lie hidden in a vault that can only be opened when the kingdom faces its darkest hour, protected by puzzles that test not just intelligence, but also the moral character of those who seek to claim them. These treasures are said to include not just gold and gems, but weapons and artifacts blessed by the goddesses themselves. The Lost Archive presents perhaps the most tantalizing mystery for scholars and historians, a legendary library said to contain the complete history of Hyrule, from its earliest days through prophecies of its ultimate destiny. This archive supposedly exists within the castle, but remains hidden behind illusions that prevent it from being found by those who seek knowledge for personal gain rather than the greater good of the kingdom. Unexplored areas within the castle continue to be discovered despite centuries of mapping and excavation efforts. Recent renovations have revealed chambers behind false walls, passages that end in barriers that may conceal additional areas, and architectural features that suggest the existence of entire sections that remain uncharted. The challenge of exploring these areas safely while preserving the castle's structural integrity limits investigation efforts and ensures that many secrets will remain hidden for the foreseeable future. The castle's connection to parallel dimensions and alternate timelines creates possibilities for mysteries that transcend normal understanding of space and time. Rooms that exist in one timeline but not another, passages that lead to different destinations depending on when they are traversed, and chambers that seem to exist partially in multiple realities simultaneously challenge conventional notions of architecture and geography. Ancient prophecies related to the castle's future speak of transformations that will reveal its ultimate purpose when the time of greatest need arrives. These prophecies describe the castle awakening like a sleeping giant, its hidden systems activating to provide protection and guidance during the final confrontation between light and darkness. The mechanical and magical systems that would enable such transformation remain hidden, waiting for the proper moment to reveal themselves. The ultimate mystery of Hyrule Castle may be how it continues to generate new enigmas and unexplained phenomena. After centuries of investigation and documentation, rather than gradually yielding its secrets to human understanding, the fortress seems to deepen its mysteries over time, suggesting that its true nature transcends simple architecture and enters realms where mortal comprehension reaches its limits. Perhaps the greatest secret the castle guards is the knowledge that some questions are more valuable than their answers, and some mysteries serve their highest purpose by remaining forever beyond the reach of complete understanding. As our journey through Hyrule Castle draws to a close, we're reminded that this isn't merely a building of stone and mortar. It's a living testament to the enduring spirit of Hyrule itself. Every corridor we've wandered, every chamber we've explored, tells the story of a kingdom that has faced destruction countless times, yet always finds the strength to rebuild. The castle stands not just as a symbol of royal power, but as a beacon of hope for all who call Hyrule home. Through wars and peace, through calamity and celebration, these ancient walls have sheltered kings and commoners alike. The sacred springs that first drew settlers to this mountain continue to flow with the same pure waters that blessed the earliest ceremonies, while the defensive systems that protected the kingdom's first rulers remain ready to guard future generations. The mysteries that still hide within the castle's depths serve as reminders that even in our age of exploration and discovery, some wonders are meant to unfold gradually, revealing themselves only when the time is right. As you drift off to sleep, let the castle's enduring presence remind you that some things are built to last, not because they're immune to change, but because they're strong enough to weather any storm. In the quiet of the night, Hyrule Castle continues its eternal vigil, watching over the kingdom it has protected for millennia, ready to face whatever dawn may bring.